Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. You're not behind in life. You're just telling yourself that you are. And that's an expensive story. It costs you momentum. It costs you patience. It costs you long-term thinking. Most people don't stall out because they're incapable. They stall out because they believe they missed the window. Like there was some invisible deadline for success and they showed up late. There is no window. There is no deadline. There is no universal timeline. There's just the work you put in. And the consistency you bring to it. The idea that you're behind usually comes from one place: comparison. You scroll through social media. You see people your age with promotions, titles, businesses, money, lifestyle upgrades. And without realizing it, you start measuring your life against snapshots of someone else's highlight reel. That's not a fair comparison. It's not even a real comparison. You're comparing your entire messy process to the 5 polished seconds they decided to post. And then you carry that comparison into your own decision making. I should be further by now. I wasted time. I'm late to the game. That internal narrative changes how you move. When you believe you're behind, you stop thinking strategically. You start thinking emotionally. You rush decisions. You chase shortcuts. You jump into things you're not ready for because you feel pressure to catch up. I've been in that headspace. There was a period where I looked around and thought everyone else had momentum but me. People had clearer paths, better titles, bigger paychecks. It felt like I was behind schedule in my own life. What I didn't see back then was that most of those people had taken 10 years of messy steps before anything looked clean. Nobody shows you the decade of uncertainty. They show you the moment it finally clicks. That's how people end up with distorted timelines. Here's the lie that really does damage. The 5-year lie. The idea that by 5 years into adulthood, you should have things figured out. Career locked, money stable, direction clear. That belief doesn't motivate people. It pressures them. And pressure makes people make bad moves. I've watched people restart their career paths multiple times. Not because they were learning, but because they were panicking. They weren't giving anything time to compound. They were constantly resetting progress. They were busy, but they weren't building. There's a difference. Momentum isn't dramatic at first. Momentum looks boring. Momentum looks repetitive. Momentum looks unremarkable. But boring consistency compounds. Panic-driven resets don't. Let me ground this with 2 real examples. Colonel Sanders didn't start KFC in his 20s. He didn't build it in his 30s. He was in his 60s before that business took off. He had failed ventures. He had setbacks. He had every reason to believe he was behind. But the timeline didn't matter. The reps did. On the other end of the spectrum, Jeff Bezos didn't start Amazon straight out of college. He spent years in corporate roles, building skills, understanding systems, learning how businesses actually operate. When he did start Amazon, it wasn't some overnight phenomenon. It was years of grinding before anyone outside the company cared. From the outside, it looks like sudden success. From the inside, it was a long, boring build. Both of those stories share the same pattern. They didn't win because they were early. They won because they stayed in the game. That's the part most people miss. There's another real-world pattern I've seen play out, and it doesn't get talked about enough. Some of the people who look ahead early in life plateau. They peak fast. They get the early wins. They get the early validation. Then they stop growing. I've watched people get the title, the raise, the lifestyle bump early on, and then coast. They mistake early momentum for long-term advantage. 5 or 10 years later, they're still living off the same identity, same role, same level of skill, same network. Meanwhile, the person who felt behind early on kept stacking. They were building skills quietly. They were learning how systems work. They were building leverage instead of just a resume. From the outside, it looks like the late bloomer, suddenly caught up. From the inside, it feels like delayed compounding, finally showing up. That's the danger of thinking timelines are fixed. Early wins don't guarantee long-term outcomes. Late starts don't disqualify you from long-term leverage. What matters is whether you're still stacking skills when the early advantage wears off. Here's a simple reframe you can use. When you catch yourself thinking you're behind, instead of asking, why am I not where I thought I'd be, ask this. If I stayed consistent for the next 5 years, would my current pace look slow? Or Would it look unstoppable? That one question shifts you out of panic mode and back into builder mode, because panic makes you look for exits. Builders look for leverage, and leverage compounds. Another thing that happens when you think you're behind is you start protecting your ego instead of building your future. You avoid beginner mistakes. You avoid being seen, learning something new. You avoid looking inexperienced. So you wait. You tell yourself you'll move when you feel more ready, more confident, more qualified. That's a comfortable excuse. Confidence doesn't show up before action. It shows up after repetition. Nobody starts ahead. They stay in the game long enough to move ahead. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't fall behind because you start late. You fall behind when you stop building. Time is going to move either way. 5 years from now is coming whether you take action or not. The only difference is whether you arrive with 5 years of compounded effort behind you. So instead of asking why you're behind, ask what you're building. What skill are you stacking? What leverage are you creating? What asset are you compounding? Those things don't move fast at first. They move quietly, then they move all at once. Here's how to recalibrate if you constantly feel like you're behind. First, stop comparing across different paths, different industries, different risk tolerance, different starting points, different resources. That comparison isn't data, it's noise. Second, stretch your timeline. If you expect meaningful change in 12 months, you're setting yourself up for frustration. If you commit to a 5-year horizon, your decision-making becomes calmer and more strategic. Longer timelines remove emotional urgency. Third, track progress, not position. Position is where you are relative to others. Progress is where you are relative to your past self. One builds momentum, the other breeds insecurity. Fourth, commit to boring consistency. There's nothing exciting about stacking small wins, but that's how leverage is built. And finally, normalize being early. You're not late. You're early in a longer game. Early phases feel slow. That's not a problem. That's the process working. Here's the bottom line. The people who actually fall behind aren't the ones who start late. They're the ones who quit early because they believed the lie that they were already behind. If you're still building, you're still on schedule. If this hit, do me a favor. Don't just nod along and go back to scrolling. Hit the like button so this actually gets shown to people who need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel if you're serious about building momentum instead of just consuming content about it. This channel isn't about hype. It's not about overnight success stories. It's about the long game. If you're trying to build leverage, skills, and real optionality in your life, this is what we're going to focus on here. No fake motivation, no guru nonsense, just practical perspective, execution, and long-term thinking. And if you know someone who's been stuck feeling behind, send this to them. Not to call them out, to remind them they're still in the game. I'll see you in the next one.